Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. And today I'm with Kevin Miller. Kevin is an author based out of Kimberley. Great to have you back, Kevin. We've interviewed you a couple times now. This is another in your series, the Milliken Creek series. And the new book is The Great Grain Elevator Incident. So that's Kevin, right. Tell us about your new book.
The Great Grain Elevator Incident. It's a book I've had in my mind for a long time. I grew up in a small town in Saskatchewan and in the 1980s, and so anybody who drove through Saskatchewan in the 80s, you know when the next town is coming because you can see the grain elevator on the horizon. And so this story is set in the late 1980s when the elevators started to be torn down and replaced with these huge inland grain terminals. And so this story is about some boys who they get wind of the fact that the elevators in their town may be torn down, and they become very concerned because they've watched this happen, you know, coming down the highway. Town after town is having the elevators ripped down, and these towns, it's like they're disappearing. Right. So these boys don't want their town to disappear too, so they embark on a quest. They team up with the mayor in an election campaign that's going on, and they concoct a scheme to try and save these elevators. But of course, it goes in a wildly different direction.
So it sort of blows up on them. Similar to some of your other books that you've written, always sort of a plot twist or something that's happening that's exciting. So who are your books targeted at?
They're written for middle grade readers, but you know, I find a lot of adults enjoy them as well. But definitely kids who enjoy some adventure fiction. I put a lot of humor in there. And there's a regional sense to it, so you're going to get a good taste of the prairies, but I think I have a lot of fans even in the United States in some really highly urbanized areas. I really try and tap into just that sort of that joy of adventure and just trying to create some kind of fun for yourself as a kid and just that, you know, that also camaraderie. I mean, it's really, a lot of it is about friends and friendships and trying to figure out a way to work together despite differences and that sort of thing.
Sure. I remember when we talked about your earlier books, the first few books in the series, you were developing the characters and so forth. Just tell me about how that sort of process goes as you develop the characters and they become like sort of more full-fledged. How does that work?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting process because so I have a continuing central cast of characters. There's 4 close friends, an older sister, and some parents, and then some other kind of peripheral characters. But with each book that happens, that cast gets bigger and bigger. But the books actually become a little bit easier to write them because I'm getting to know my characters so well that you really just have to put them in a situation, and I kind of liken it to running around behind them transcribing what they're doing, you know, because they become real in a way that fictional characters do. And so, you know, I'll always have a plan for the direction a story's going to go, but they often have better ideas than I do. And so, yeah, it's been really fun to watch their character develop over time and then also to see the cast grow.
So you said it's set in Saskatchewan, and that is the case with the new book, right?
Yes.
Obviously. How is it that you know that area so well?
I grew up on a farm outside of a small town called Foam Lake.
Okay. And
so it was an age of, you can tell by the color of my beard, it was an age of no internet and not a lot of TV and that sort of thing. And so, my closest friend lived about 2 miles away, and we'd ride bikes to each other's houses and come up with some kind of a crazy thing to do. So a lot of what happens in these books is very much inspired by things we either did growing up or things we dreamt about doing. Right. And I mean, when you have an old abandoned grain elevator in a town a few miles down the road, I mean, it's only a matter of time before you find a way inside and begin to explore. So that's the kind of spirit of the books.
So I would have to think there's a fair bit of Kevin Miller in these books. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a bit of me kind of buried here, there, and everywhere, but also a lot of people that I knew growing up. You know, the original cast of characters were initially based on some people I knew, but they very much, you know, became their own type of people. But yeah, my wife laughs when she reads the books because she's like, "Oh, Kevin, you're all over the place in here." So
what is the reaction to your books?
It's been really positive. I do a lot of touring, a lot of workshops in schools all across Western Canada. And that's kind of been growing over the last few years. And so the books definitely are resonating with kids all across, all the way out to Ontario, really. And just recently I've made a lot of inroads into the United States. And just, I think what kids are tapping into, and a lot of adults as well, is just sort of the fun of the books. You know, they're kind of, you know, I purposely set them in an age where there's no cell phones and no internet and that sort of thing, just because, you know, I want to give a picture of what life can be like without just having a screen in front of your face all the time. Not that they're really agenda-driven books, but to me that's just a more exciting atmosphere in which to write.
So when you wrote the first book, did you envision this as being a series?
I did. I always thought about it as a series. In fact, the Great Grain Elevator Incident was going to be the second book in the series, but I ended up doing 2 other books, Unlimited and The Water War, prior to getting around to this book. Because, as a writer, as you know, you live with an idea for a while, and it's almost like the story tells you when it's ready to go. Mm-hmm. And so this one, I just kind of had to live with it a little bit longer just to finally have the plot fall into place.
So tell me about your writing process. How do you approach writing a series? How do you approach writing? Do you write every day? Is it something that you sit down and write the whole book, or how does that all go?
For me, a lot of the beginning process is just coming up with the initial idea and then living with it in my mind for a long time and kind of working it over. So like I said, I do a lot of writing workshops. I end up driving all across the prairies, and I spend a lot of time thinking, working through my story. And then there comes a time when I'm ready to outline it, so I do that. And then when I'm actually writing the draft of the book, I try and do about a chapter a day. But the last 2 books I did, I wrote the last 10,000 words of each book in one day. It was just like the story just downloaded. So, and I just couldn't really stop until I got it out. So then I'll go back and revise, several times, just until I feel it's ready. And I have some beta readers as well who will always give me feedback.
So 4 books in, is the series going to continue, or are you feeling that you've exhausted that subject, or how's that?
Yeah, well,
going?
I'm working on book 5 right now. It's called
Okay.
Snowbound, and I've got ideas for at least 3 more books in the series,
Okay.
and we'll see where things go from there. I mean, as long as I feel that the stories are worth telling, I'm gonna keep telling them. But I have some other projects as well that I'm working on too.
Sure. So how do you reach young readers?
Well, that's a tough one. And so that was where I got the idea to make myself available to teach writing workshops. So I started contacting schools and teachers and that sort of thing. And I said, I'd be willing to come to your school and teach. And so I can actually bring a value to the school. And so I spend a lot of time working with young people, teaching them how to develop stories, how to write scenes, and that sort of thing.
Right.
And so, that introduces me to teachers, to librarians, and then directly to young readers themselves. And so that's been a really great way to connect and to actually bring something of value to schools too.
So what is your impression? We're talking about young readers here. Are they reading as much as they used to? We hear all this information about the digital age and so forth. Do they like getting a book and reading it?
I think a lot of kids still do. There's some schools I go to, I'm a little bit like a rock star, like I get mobbed by kids and signing, I lose track of how many books I'm signing and that sort of thing, and they're just super excited to meet an author and to, read the books. And I hear back from librarians, they can't keep the things on the shelf. I mean, there's other places you go where, you can just tell, it's just, it's not registering. But I think a kid is a kid, and that, we hear a lot of negativity around technology and screens and that sort of thing, but I really think that it's just been my consistent experience in now, hundreds of classrooms, is that there's that spark that turns on when you get a kid excited about using their imagination and creating a story. It's just universal. I mean, I just see it happen over and over again.
Yeah, that's so important to have them sort of turned on to reading at an early age. So
yeah, I drill that into them all the time.
Yeah.
I say, the damage that the phones and tablets do to your brain, a book can undo the damage.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the publishing side of the project. So you've used the same publisher throughout?
Yeah, actually, I consider myself an indie publisher. A lot of people might say self-publisher, but I kind of look at it on the same level as indie music or indie film. I've worked in traditional publishing for a lot of years. I still actually do some editing on the side for publishers. And I've kind of seen the industry inside and out. And I think we're really at a stage right now where I often advise authors who are starting out to forego mainstream publishing because, number one, you're not going to make any money. Number two, you're going to have really virtually no creative control over your book or the schedule. I mean, you're going to be waiting months, if not years, for your book to come out. And you're going to lose all rights to your books because nothing ever goes out of print anymore. So I really think indie publishing it's offered all kinds of opportunities for writers. So I publish through Kindle Publishing, which is a branch of Amazon.
Yeah.
And it's been great because I also do graphic design and that sort of thing. I hire an artist to work on my covers. And I do all my own marketing. So not a lot of writers want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be an entrepreneur. And so I am totally comfortable getting involved in the marketing and sales of my books. And And yeah, Amazon's been a great partner for that, just because they have such a massive distribution, and that just seems to be one of the first places people go looking for books.
Super.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Congratulations, fourth book in a series. That's something to be commended. It's amazing. So we look forward to the next book in the series, and we'll have you back again. But just to wrap it up, when you sit down and actually write the book, do you have the whole book laid out in your mind, or does that develop as you go?
I do have a detailed outline that I create, and you know, as I'll stick to that initially, but that always will end up changing as I'm working on the book. But you know, it depends. Like my second book stuck very close to the outline. This book went in a wildly different direction toward the conclusion. But again, the story will tell you where it needs to go. And you know, I think there's discoveries to be made in the outline phase, but then there's also discoveries that are made when you're actually writing the manuscript.
Well, congratulations, Kevin. So again, the book is The Great Grain Elevator Incident, so the fourth in this series. Thanks again for being our guest on Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Jack Sandberg. Jack is well known in the Cranbrook area. Jack, tell me a little bit about your background. You were a teacher for what, 27 years, is that correct?
37.
37 years.
37 years.
Okay, where did you teach?
Well, my first year was in Wardner, and then as soon as that year was done, I was transferred into Cranbrook, and they opened T.M. Roberts Elementary School, and that was where I started my city career. And since then, from 1962 onwards, I was teaching until retirement in 1997.
So you've been retired for a bit, and congratulations on your new publishing project.
Thank you.
So you put out a children's book called Ruby the Hummingbird. Can you give me an overview of what the book is about and sort of what the inspiration behind it was?
Well, the inspiration is over the past 25 years, I've been sending friends and family Christmassy verse.
Right.
It's hardly called poetry because it doesn't leave an image in your mind necessarily of poem.
Right.
But at first they were newsletters explaining what had happened in my family
Right.
over the past year.
Right.
And at one point I got a message from a relative who said, you know, Jack, some of us can't take part in the kinds of things you do, and we're a little envious. Can you maybe change your program a little?
Okay.
And I said, wow, I wasn't trying to hurt anybody's feelings for sure, but yes, I think I can.
Right.
So I wrote a silly verse poem along the lines of "'Twas the night before Christmas," and all through the house. So it's that idea. But the verses of the story had to be a kindness story with an unhappiness corrected in the story. And the last line is in almost every story, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night." Okay. So that's the Christmassy part.
Okay, so you have that tradition within your family that you've carried on for a number of years. So how did you take that tradition and translate it into a book?
Well, for the past 20 years, our family tradition has been to have a Christmas celebration Christmas Eve.
Okay.
So when everybody's gathered around the tree after the big dinner, each little person is to display a talent of some kind, and they're eager to sing, dance, play the piano, play the saxophone, entertain the adults.
Okay.
This would be anywhere from 6 to 12 grandchildren.
Okay.
And the last one is always, "Grandpa, let's hear your story."
Okay.
And I'm pleased, but I'm a little bit giddy about it as well. And I have to say that I have to buy a bigger hat now because it's making me feel way out of place.
Right. So that's the inspiration for your book?
Well, my son, who is not in Cranbrook, but grew up here, said, "Dad, we've told you for several years, other people could enjoy some of these if you would just try to publish one."
Right.
I said, "Well, I'll try to publish one and see what happens. And if it comes close to covering all the expenses, I'll be happy. I'm not trying to make money at it. I'm trying to share a happy greeting with people.
Well, I'm going to talk about that experience that you had with your publisher and actually the work that went into making that a reality. But Jack, I just wondered if you would maybe read the first page of your book for us.
I'll be thrilled to. Ruby the hummingbird. Ruby being ruby-throat.
Okay.
The ruby-throated hummingbird. Summer had passed, the flowers had dried, furry animals had sought out warm places to hide from the long winter's cold. They could sleep until spring. They could sleep in the ground till they heard birdies sing. Some birds had flown south, where the winters are warm, not happy to live through a long winter storm. They knew how to move with the seasons each year. They knew to escape while the weather was clear.
Okay, so that gives us a little bit of a taste or an introduction to the book. So let's just talk about how the actual publishing of the book transpired. So you worked with a company, I believe, called Friesen Press.
Yes.
And the interesting thing I find about your book is not only have you got the story, but you've got illustrations as well. So tell me about how that all fit together and how that came into a book format.
Well, I got the address and phone number of Friesen's, and I had previous experience with Friesen's as they published our South Country history book,
Okay.
a hardcover piece of work. And I asked them to please just check this silly verse over and tell me if they thought it had enough quality to sell, with illustrations. That with an illustration on the left and a verse or two or three on the right, would this be a suitable material to put on the market? And they looked at it, and this was on the telephone by the time I had sent them a hard copy, because my technological energies are not capable. They said, you're going to do the illustrations yourself? I said, oh, no. I can tell you what I want, but I'll have to get an illustrator.
Right.
We have, and their word was, a bank. We have a bank of illustrators.
Right.
If I send you a few portfolios, you could check them out. And I said,
Right.
well, I can tell you to begin with, don't send me stick figures or the current cartoon drawings. I want something more along the lines of Walt Disney or Walter Lantz with Bambi or Snow White or something like that. They sent me 3 portfolios, and my eye caught on the first one. So I was on the emails by this time, and I said, this one by Patricia, somebody, is the one I'd like to have do it. Great.
Yeah.
Now you have to show us where the page breaks are, so we can see which verses are being illustrated on this left-hand page.
Right.
So I did that, and then they sent me the proofs. I said, I love it. It's just perfect. And all the time we're communicating about which stage we are and time passing. And when the book came out, I was really pleased with it. But the illustrator was not mentioned.
Oh.
No acknowledgement.
Right.
And I phoned immediately and I said, there's something missing here. Patricia somebody doesn't have her name here. Oh, no. You've paid for her services, $360. And I said, oh my gosh, silly. Each page is probably worth near that. He said, well, that's the way we're doing it, Jack. So in a half-joking mind, I said, can I at least send her a bouquet of roses? Well, that's not appropriate, he giggled. So I said, you told me I could have a review and an alteration made at some point. Well, we've printed several of these, and yes, you can. So there's no name on the book for illustrator. He said, for a price you can have her name, then he told me who it was, added under your biography at the back, where your name is. And I said, well, can we get it on the front cover? No, that's a much more expensive proposition. I said, well, for this time, I want the rest of the books to please come out acknowledging this illustrator. And if this book is successful enough, and I do another of the 25 stories I have, I want her name to be on the cover, and I would like the same illustrator if she's still available.
So they agreed to that?
They did.
Good. Well, I can see why you would want to do that, because she did an excellent job of illustrating your book. And you know, you tell the story, but she tells it visually, so it comes across very, very nicely. So Jack, what was your experience like dealing with Friesen Press?
I was really pleased because I let them know I had no technical skills. I don't even have the correct computer program.
So they coached you through each step?
Every step.
Good, good.
When
Well,
I started last November,
right.
and they said within a week or two, they said, and when do you plan to have this out? When would you like it out? I said, it's a Christmassy story. Can we get it by mid-October? I got it out on the 14th of October.
Congratulations on the book. So it's Rubing the Hummingbird. I understand it's available at local bookstores and
Yes.
and also here at the Cranbrook Public Library as
Yes.
well. So congratulations. We really
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the time to be our guest.
Thank you.
This has been Talking Kootenay Books, and my name is Keith Powell.